right, so we really worked together to make sure that we're providing everything we possibly can to ensure that the learning experience for our students is as top-notch as possible. And so that includes efforts to support the students, of course, to support our teachers, but we wanted to include something like tonight to also support our families. All right. We do recognize that the partnership between the school and the families is critical to the growth and development of our children, from our earliest learners all the way to our students that are ready to leave our high school. And that's why we found Amy McCready to support us. In fact, we were fortunate to have Amy work with us a couple of years ago, and we thought of her right away when we wanted to continue to provide programming to support parents. So Amy is the founder of Positive Parenting Solutions and the creator of the 7-Step Parenting Success System, and you'll hear much more about that this evening. She's also the author of 2 best-selling books, If I Have to Tell You One More Time and The Me, Me, Me Epidemic. The good news is we have lots of signed copies of The Me, Me, Me Epidemic that we will be raffling off to participants from tonight's program, as well as last night's program where we focused on our K-6 students. Amy has been a regular on The Today Show and has been a contributor for other shows like CBS This Morning, CNN, Fox and Friends, MSNBC, Rachel Ray, Steve Harvey, The Doctors, and many others. Her greatest joy, of course, which you will hear loud and clear tonight, is helping moms, dads, and guardians like yourself become the parents they've always wanted to be and ensure that their youngsters get everything they possibly can. So a couple of ground rules before we get started. While we're here, you have the ability to turn your camera on and off. If your camera is off, it will definitely help the flow of the video streaming, if there is any. We will ask you to reserve questions until the end, where you can submit questions in one of 2 ways. You can submit them in the chat, which they will come to Mrs. Gallagher, and she'll be able to help communicate those to Amy. And we can do that so that we can keep your identity to yourself, and we can present that question for the betterment of everyone. But you have another option for sharing your questions as well. You can use the emoji at the bottom of your screen where you see a smiley face with a plus, and in there you can raise your hand. You want to raise your hand, we can certainly call on you and unmute you, and you can ask your question to Amy directly. But we'll have 2 segments tonight. The first will be Amy's presentation, and then a question and answer opportunity. If during Amy's presentation you have a question or you're confused, you can certainly share that in the chat, and Mrs. Gallagher will make sure that Ms. McCready knows the question and gets that information to her. Last and final thing I want to share before we get started is in the next day or so, we will make sure we send a survey out to all participants, gathering feedback on not only this program, but also future programs that we can offer that will help continue this effort to consolidate out what we do to ensure the experience for our students is the best it possibly can be. And then last but not least is we are recording this session so that we can share it on our district homepage, just like we did for last night's event, in case you want to refer back to it or you want to refer it to a family or a friend or someone who wasn't able to make it tonight. We will make these recordings publicly available so that anybody can view them. With that, and no further ado, Amy, the floor is yours. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight in Roxbury.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. It's so great to be with all of you again. And I'm just delighted to be with our families of children 7 to 12th grade. So welcome to Positive Parenting Solutions, Silver Bullet Strategies for Well-Behaved Kids and Happy Parents. So I hope that sounds good to you. And I'm going to just give you a disclaimer that when I say kids throughout this session, that's just sort of an all-encompassing term, but we're talking about primarily tweens and teens here tonight. But as I was preparing this presentation, I thought, this is for tweens and teens, but it's also for any of you who have young kids that kind of act like they're teenagers. Like parents will say, well, I have a 5-year-old, but he's going on 15. So if you have kids that fit into that category, I promise you the tools that you learn tonight are going to be extremely helpful. So if you stay until the end of the session, I want to tell you what you're going to learn. First, we're going to talk about the vicious parenting cycle that we tend to get into and why that backfires on us. I'm going to share the top 3 parenting blunders that we tend to do with tweens and teens. And I'm going to give you my favorite survival tools for tweens and teens. And again, littles who act like teens. And we're going to share truly life-changing gift that Roxbury School District is providing to all of its families. And I'm going to be answering your questions. And if we have even more time at the end, I'm going to give you even more solutions for backtalk attitude and disrespect. So I have a lot on our agenda tonight. I'm going to skip past some of this intro stuff because Dr. Seib already gave such a nice introduction. But what he didn't mention is that I am a mom to two grown-up men and now a new daughter. And so they are super fun. But I also want to tell you that I'm really old and I've been doing this for a really long time, since my kids were this age. And what I can promise you is the tools that you learn in this session tonight are battle tested. I've been teaching them for years for parents, to parents all over the world. And my promise is that when you walk away from this session, you will have tools you can start using immediately and begin to see results on that. So from them. So I hope that sounds good. Again, everything we talk about tonight is primarily for the bigs, but it will apply to your littles as well, including kids with differences. Now, before we get into the specific strategies, I just want to talk for a minute about our end game. So whatever age your kids are right now, I just want you to sort of close your eyes and imagine they are walking across that stage at graduation. And maybe they're going off to college or the military, or they're starting their first job. But whatever they are doing next, right? Think about that child and where do you want them to be in their development? What skills must they have? What character traits do you want them to have? What kind of a human do you want to be launching into the world? And so I'd like to think of that as our end game tonight. And my hope is that everything that I'm teaching you is going to support that goal that you have. So let's start with that vicious cycle. I want to share kind of a vicious cycle that I would get into a lot with my kids before I started doing this positive parenting work. And it would usually start by me asking my kids to do something in what I thought was like my nicest mom voice, but then nothing would happen. And so I'd have to repeat myself, and then I'd give a little reminder, and then I'd repeat again, and then I'd remind again, and repeat and remind, and repeat and remind, and repeat and remind. Like, you probably know how this goes, right? And then I would get so tired of repeating and reminding that I would just blow, and I would get angry and frustrated, and I would have like a full-on adult tantrum, right? And then after that big adult tantrum, and then I would feel totally guilty. And then guess what? From my kids' perspective, I was the bad guy. So they were the ones who weren't listening in the first place, but I end up being the bad guy. Does that happen in your house? Tell us in the chat if that feels at all familiar to you. But guess what? After that big adult tantrum that I would have, they would actually do what I asked them to do, right? After all of that repeating and reminding, I yell, and now they spring to action. I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's just the way it works. Maybe that's what I have to do to get my kids to take action. So, yes, it did work in the short term, right? But at what cost? Well, of course, I'm the bad guy from my kids' perspective. And then I end up feeling like the worst parent. So, like, this is not really how I anticipated parenting to be. So again, I'd love to know if that resonates with you. But what happened in that cycle that I described to you, and what I suspect is probably happening at your house, is that we have trained our kids to be parent deaf. And what that means is that they don't have to really listen. They don't have to take action until we yell. And so what happens is we get into this vicious cycle of power struggles. I want you to know that if this is happening at your house, and if this is not working for you, I promise you, it's not you and it's not your kids, right? These tools, this strategy of repeating, reminding, exploding just doesn't work for long-term behavior change. Fortunately, there's a whole toolbox of strategies that are going to be way more effective for you, and I'm going to start with some of those this evening. So first, let's talk very quickly about the most common parenting blunders. And this is not to shame anybody or call anybody out. I want you to know that I've made every single one of these blunders. And most of the parents, well, all the parents that I work with have made these blunders. But it's important that we be aware of them so we can start to turn them around. So let me just mention one thing. Do you see the text down at the bottom of the screen? It's all funky. Well, I'm operating from a different office tonight and on a different computer. And so the fonts are going to be all crazy throughout this presentation. So whoever can identify like the most number of funky fonts in my presentation tonight, I'm going to send you a copy of my other book. So anyway, blanket apologies for the way the fonts are going to look throughout. But let's talk about those 3 parenting blunders. The first one is the wrong job description. So so much of our time with our kids is on the tactical stuff, right? Getting them to do their homework and do their chores and make sure they put deodorant on and they show up on time for their practices and all of that kind of stuff. It's all that tactical stuff. But that's really not our job description, right? Our job is preparing them to be adults, fully functioning, successful, happy, healthy adults that can contribute in the world. Our job is to take them from being completely dependent on us to being fully independent, right? And that's a pretty big job when you think about it. And so think about all the skills that our kids have to learn to be fully functioning, successful adults. They need to learn responsibility and decision making and household tasks, right? Not only do they need to know how to clean the shower, but they need to know how to change the air filters and the oil in the car and all those things that you do day in and day out. They need to be proficient in everything around health and wellness, financial acumen, and social skills. All of these things they need to learn before we launch them out into their next step. So that's a pretty big job for you. The second blunder that we tend to make is called pendulum parenting. And that is when the pendulum swings from being overly permissive to overly strict, right? And what happens is because we love our people and we want to have a warm and a friendly relationship with them, sometimes we are a little bit more permissive than we should be. And then, of course, as everybody knows, when things are too permissive, it's going to spiral out of control. And so then we swing in the other direction and we get tough and we're issuing punishments and, putting all these boundaries in place. And we swing back and forth very often between overly permissive to overly strict. And I will also tell you that during this period of the pandemic, many of the families that I work with have swung to the more permissive style of parenting. And now they're trying to get back to it and they're not quite sure how to do it. So, this pendulum parenting sends a lot of mixed messages to our kids and it creates a lot of power struggles. Another one of the big parenting blunders that we tend to do is not being on their team. Now, I know you think you're on your kids' team, but how do they really perceive it? Very often, we are doing a lot of ordering, correcting, and directing, telling them what to do and what not to do so much of our day. Very often, we are lecturing rather than problem solving with them. Sometimes, especially for high achieving parents, we set unreasonable expectations on our kids, and that can be really discouraging. And for us controlling types, we tend to exert too much control on our kids, right? And think about where your kids are in the tween and teen years. Like their job is to separate from us, right? And take on more of their own control. But we want to exert that control on them. And that contributes to more power struggles. The thing that we have to remember about control and power is that need for power is universal. Back when your kids were very, very little, they had this need for independence and autonomy and control over their own lives. But for kids, they often don't feel like they have a whole lot of control. So think about your kids, whatever age they are. How much real control do they have over their own world, right? Because they have us who pretty much decide everything. For the little ones, what they'll wear and when they'll eat and when they get older, when they do their homework, when they do their chores. From their perspective, we kind of control everything, right? So that continuum that we're on of having all the control and then shifting it over to them really makes it difficult to parent teenagers. And I know you want to be in control, but it is a battle that we will never win as parents of teenagers. So, where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with the fact that the more emotionally invested you are in their success, in their homework, in their chores, all of those things that are really important to you, our kids have even more power. So we really need the tools to negotiate that power arrangement. Now, the other thing that makes a little complicated parenting tweens and teens is personality. So I want to ask you, could your personality be making your kids fight back? And this is a huge issue for kids of all ages, but particularly tweens and teens. One of the things that we have parents do in our online training program is go through a parent personality assessment. So you can uncover which aspects of your personality might make your kids want to fight back. So if you have a very controlling personality like I do, we tend to invite power struggles. because nobody wants to be controlled and told what to do all the time. And so for parents like me who are very controlling, the natural reaction for our kids is to fight back. So it's really important that we understand our personality type and how that affects our kids' behavior. Now, if you are interested in taking that parent personality assessment, hang on to the end because I'm going to share with you how you can get access to that. Because the really exciting thing is once you understand how your personality affects your kids' behavior, then you know what tools that you need to use from the toolbox to counteract that. So that is really, really powerful. All right, so we know our three parenting blunders. We also know that this vicious cycle is creating one power struggle after another for us. So what I would like to do is get into some specific tools that you can use to counteract some of those blunders and also those power struggles. So the first tool that I want to share with you is probably the most powerful tool in our toolbox, and this comes from step one of our 7-step parenting success system. If you use this tool that I'm going to share within a day or two of using it, you are going to have fewer power struggles, less back talk, better cooperation, and a willingness to help out, less sibling fighting, happier attitudes for you and your kids, and more open communication. So tell me with a thumbs up whether that sounds good to you. If so, I want you to take a really good notes on this next tool that we're going to talk about, which is called Mind, Body, and Soul Time. We're going to talk about how this works with tweens and teens, but you are also going to be using it with your younger kids as well, all right? Because it has such a positive impact on their behavior. So what I'm going to do is explain the tool, and then we'll talk about how to implement it. So Mind, Body, and Soul Time is defined as one-on-one time, one parent and one child. All right, so the other siblings aren't around, you are not, your partner is not around, you are fully present and emotionally available for that child. And the reason that's important is think about your day and how much of your day you're multitasking. You're either doing other things that have to be done around the house, you're doing your work at home that you're trying to get done, you are dealing with the other children, you're going through your mental to-do list. So much of our day is spent multitasking, and we're not always fully present and emotionally available for our tweens and teens. And during this mind, body, and soul time, you're going to be doing what your child, your tween or teen likes to do. So if they like to download music, that's what you're going to do. If you have kids in the middle school age, like maybe they like to build Legos, maybe it's reading a chapter book. It's whatever your child wants to do. And you're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes doing it. So it doesn't take a long time to do mind, body, and soul time. But the beauty of mind, body, and soul time is they get that huge hit of one-on-one attention from you, and they get a huge hit of control and power because they get to call the shots during this time. And let me tell you, this is probably one of the few times during their entire day that they get to call the shots. And the prescription for mind, body, and soul time is one time a day with each of your kids. Now, you might be thinking, I don't know, Amy, do my tweens and teens really want to spend time with me? And the answer is yes, 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 they do. Even though their job as a tween and teen is to begin to individualize and to separate from you, they still desperately want and need that emotional connection and time with you. In the responses that many of you filled out when you registered for this meeting, there was a lot about having that loving, lasting relationship with our kids. This is how it happens, right? Emotional connection is not built when we're ordering, correcting, and directing them. It doesn't happen, right? It happens when we are emotionally connecting with them. We're totally focused on them, doing what they want to do. And so they know that during this 10 or 15 minutes, nothing is more important than this time that you're spending with them. It gives them a huge hit of attention and a huge hit of power and control. Now, the one thing that I really recommend that you do is label your mind, body, and soul time. So for younger kids, we could call it daddy and Sophie time. You could call it me and me time, like whatever you want to call, or you and me time rather. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but I really like to label it because it reminds your kids that, yeah, you did this thing. And if you feel like labeling it is going to be too corny for your kids, that's okay. All right. All you have to do is just punctuate it. So at the end of your time together, you can say, you know what? I've loved having this special time with you. I've loved having this one-on-one time, just me and you. It's like one of the best parts of my day. Imagine how good that feels to a tween or teen. That is so affirming and that creates such emotional connections. And let me tell you what, the next time you ask her to unload the dishwasher, she is going to be 50% more willing to do it than she was before. All right. The beautiful thing about mind, body, and soul time is that it improves behavior in so many areas. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Amy, get real. Like, I don't have a whole lot of time in my day, right? So I want you to think of mind, body, and soul time as an investment in good behavior. As you consistently do mind, body, and soul time, I promise you, you are going to see a reduction in attention seeking and power seeking behaviors. You are going to see a reduction in sibling rivalry, fighting, and competition because guess what? So much of that sibling fighting and rivalry is about competition for your attention. When you are giving your kids, even your tweens and teens, that one on one time and attention, it minimizes the sibling rivalry so much. And you are going to see an improvement in cooperation, happier attitudes, more open communication, and for our kids who struggle with regulating big emotions, regulating big emotions, you are going to see an improvement in that area. We use mind, body, and soul time therapeutically for kids who struggle with big emotions. So, on so many levels, mind, body, and soul time is truly the silver bullet of the parenting tools. Again, one on one, you're fully present, doing what the child likes to do for 10 or 15 minutes. Now, the question comes up, what should we do for mind, body, and soul time? For little kids, that's easy. You know what they like to do, right? Well, I like for mind, body, and soul time to be something that we play or do. And I love for it to be an eye to eye activity and not a technology based activity. Now, I also know that sometimes tweens and teens can be skeptical when you suddenly want to spend one on one time with them. So, if you have a skeptic, then maybe technology is an easier way for you to get into the mind, body, and soul time groove. If you can spend time with them that is not technology based, all the better. But it might be, again, if you have a skeptic, it might be watching a Netflix series that you're both really into. Or it could be you reading a chapter book to them. Or if they love video games, you can play video games. It doesn't matter what it is, it just matters that it's something that your child loves to do and you are getting into their world and connecting with them, and they are going to love it. Now, if you are looking for ideas for Mind, Body, and Soul Time, I have a list of, I think, 131 ideas, a bunch for tweens and teens, and I'm going to share with you how to get that a little bit later on. So let's talk quickly about how you're going to get started. First, I want you to decide when you can realistically do mind, body, and soul time with each of your kids, no matter how old they are, right? So maybe for your little one, it's before they leave for school in the morning. For your older one, it's after school. For your really older teenager, maybe it's before bedtime. So figure out when you can do it, but bring the kids into the brainstorming process and say, guys, help me figure this out. I need to figure out when we can do this thing. And you explain what mind, body, and soul time is, that family time is great and fun and we love it, but you also want to spend one on time with each of them. So bring them into the process and say, help me figure out how we can get this done throughout the week. And your times are going to vary probably throughout the week because older kids have more activities. And so it may be different on Tuesday and Thursday than it is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or the weekends, but that's totally okay. I really like for you to post your mind, body, and soul time schedule on the refrigerator because anything on the refrigerator is important, right? And it's important for your kids to know that you value this commitment that you're making to them. And I want you to treat it like a work commitment, right? We had this event set up for 6 o'clock tonight, and I would never blow this off, right? This is a commitment that I am going to show up for. That's how I want you to view mind, body, and soul time with all of your kids. Like it is a work appointment that you would never miss it unless something really big came up. And sometimes that happens, right? Somebody has a doctor's appointment, there's something else going on. That's okay. But what you want to do is let your kids know up front, hey, you know what? I'm going to miss our one-on-one time together tonight because I have a late meeting, but I wanted to let you know that up front and let's figure out when we can reschedule. All right. So that way your kids know that you're not just blowing it off, that it's important to you and it's so important that we're going to reschedule. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the time. How are you going to find time to do mind, body, and soul time with your kids? Well, the first thing is I'm going to recommend that you beg, borrow, and steal time from other activities that are not as important, right? Like, will the world come to an end if the laundry is not folded right now? No, no, mind, body, and soul time is way more important than that. If the dishes aren't done until the kids are in bed, not a big deal, right? Um, Maybe give up a little bit of TV time or streaming. Like this is so much more important than Yellowstone, right? So take time away from things that just are not as important. The other thing that you can do is a rebranding strategy because you're probably already spending some one-on-one time with your kids. So take that time that you're already spending and rebrand it as mind, body, and soul time. So if you take your son to lacrosse practice or whatever it is every day or whenever that happens. It's one parent and one child in the car, right? Don't have him looking at his device. Turn on the radio, sing songs, talk about your day, do tell jokes, whatever, but turn that time that you're already spending into mind, body, and soul time. Same thing for bedtime. Now, I know for littles, we do the whole tuck-in routine and all of that, but for tweens and teens, sometimes that goes by the wayside, and it shouldn't. It may be one of the few opportunities that you have to really connect with your tween and teen, to talk about your day, to talk about what's going on, to share. Use that opportunity before bed to read a chapter book, one chapter every night. Older kids love that. Use that time and rebrand it as mind, body, and soul time. Again, as long as it meets the criteria, which is one-on-one, fully present, and emotionally available, doing what the child wants to do, and it only needs to take 10 or 15 minutes. The other thing I'm going to ask you to do, and I know this is hard, is to steal a little bit of time away from social media, right? So back in 2004 is when Facebook came out. We are now in 2022. There are so many apps that are available to us, so many social media options, and it sucks up so much of our time. So I'm going to ask you to steal 10 or 15 minutes away from the time that we would normally spend on Instagram and use that for mind, body, and soul time because you are going to get much better results and much more joy in your life from spending that time with your tweens and teens rather than scrolling on Instagram. Because as wonderful as social media is and as much as technology has changed our world, the truth bomb here is that times have changed, but our kids' emotional needs have not changed one bit. They need that emotional connection with you. They need that attention from you, and they need that power, that hit of control that comes from the mind, body, and soul time. So I'm hoping that you are willing to do that, to start filling their attention buckets with this new tool. Again, the benefits are too numerous to mention, but I'd love to know in the chat if you are willing to do that. I'm hoping you are going to just start. Now, I know you probably have loads of questions about mind, body, and soul time. I'm not going to get into any of those now, but I'm going to tell you how you can get the answers to all of those at the end. And the last truth bomb on this topic that I want to share with you is we want our kids to do all sorts of things, right? But here's the truth bomb. If we want our kids to do the things that are important to us, like cleaning their room and all their family jobs and doing their homework, we have to do what's important to them. We have to step up and do what's important to them. So I hope that sounds good to you. Now, I want to get into the next tool in our toolbox. And obviously, if you have questions on mind, body, and soul time, write those down so I can address those during the Q&A time. All right, the next tool that I want to talk to you about is called family contributions. And you might be thinking, well, what does that really mean? Well, what I'm talking about is chores. But I don't want you to ever use the word chores again. I'm going to beg you not to, because chores denotes drudgery, right? When I call it family contributions, it sends the message that what they do makes a difference in your family. We are all hardwired to make a difference, right? And when kids contribute, they make a difference, and it fosters that not only their skill set, but also their sense of capability and significance. The paradigm that I want you to adopt, if you're not already doing this, is that all kids, toddlers to teens, must contribute in your home, right? Nobody gets off the hook. Everybody must contribute, because remember, our job is to take our kids from being completely dependent to being fully independent, and they need to be They need to be self-sufficient in all aspects of running the home. If you are interested in the Jobs for Kids by Age list, I have them from 18 months all the way through the high teens. Again, stay tuned at the end and I'll tell you how to access that list. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yes, Amy, we all believe that family contributions are important, but how am I really going to get my kids to do their family contributions? We have battles about that day in and day out. Well, that's what we're going to talk about next with our next tool. This next tool addresses those parenting blunders that we tend to fall into. It addresses the repeat, remind, explode cycle, and it is one of the favorite tools of parents in our program, and I think you're going to love it as well. But before I explain the tool, I want you to answer a question to yourself, and that is, what are all of those things that you ask your kids to do during the day? Right? What do you ask them to do from the time they wake up in the morning until the time they go to bed at night? Whether your list is long or short, the truth bomb that I want you to remember is that parent priorities are not the same as kid priorities, right? Do your kids really care if the wet towel is on the floor? Probably not. Do they care about keeping their room clean? No, they really don't care about those things. Those are parent priorities. But the thing is, every request and reminder from us is an opportunity for a power struggle, for an eye roll, for a huff and a groan, right? So we need to get all of those things done that have to get done, but without the power struggles associated with it. So this next tool that I'm going to teach you comes from step 3 of our 7-step parenting success system. And it is called when then. When then, first I'm going to define it, and that is when then is a tool that is used when we need our kids to do something or take some action. We need them to unload the dishwasher. We need them to finish their homework. We need them to help out with a sibling. Whatever it happens to be, it's something that we need the kid to do. And when then works because it delays or denies a privilege, we'll call that X, we'll call that Y until X, the yucky stuff, is done. So basically, the yucky stuff has to be done before they can enjoy the fun stuff. So for example, when you put away the clean laundry, then you can hang out with your friends. When you finish your family contributions, then you can have your technology time. When you finish your homework, and I've checked it if that's important in your family, then we can leave for soccer. So basically, it provides a motivation to complete the undesirable task. So if homework or family contributions are an undesirable task in your kid's eyes, it provides a motivation to do that. That's to get on to the fun part, right? And it includes a built-in consequence for not doing what you've asked. So if he doesn't get his homework done, well, then he's going to lose his technology time. If he doesn't finish his family contributions, then he might miss out on soccer. So it's the motivation and the built-in consequence that makes this so effective. Now, I have 5 ground rules and 1 caution that I want you to really incorporate into using this tool. So the first ground rule is that the privilege, the then, must be something that your kid truly cares about. So in the examples that I gave you, we assume that hanging out with his friends, having technology time, and going to soccer, those are all things that he cares about, right? Those are motivating enough for him to do the yucky stuff. So if there isn't something that your child cares about or would create a motivation, well then when then would not be the right tool for that situation. And again, we have loads of other tools. We only use when then when it makes sense. The second ground rule is that we have to say the when then in a calm voice and without emotion, right? You cannot give your when then with gritted teeth and frustration in your tone, right? That's not going to go well. That's going to turn into a power struggle. So say the when then in a calm voice and without emotion. And that attitude of indifference is essential, right? When you clean up the bonus room, then you can enjoy your technology time. Either way, I'm totally fine, right? You have to have that attitude of indifference. Again, otherwise it turns into a power struggle. If your kids know that you are invested in a particular thing, then they have all the power. right? And then that creates the power struggle. The other thing is, as you begin using this tool, I want you to really emphasize the words when and then, right? When, big long pause, you finish your homework, then you can have your 30 minutes of technology time. So really emphasize the words when and then. After you start using this tool, your kids are going to understand how it works. But in the beginning, be very intentional about those words. Ground rule number 3, after you say the when then, walk away, please, 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 right? If you stand there, guess what? You are providing an audience for badgering and complaining, and it's not fair, and you're so mean, and nobody else has to do this, and all of that nonsense, right? When we disengage, it allows the child to save face, right? He can get the thing done, but we're not standing over him with hands on our hips, exerting all of our power on him to get it done. And you're not there to provide an audience for all the moaning and groaning. So walk away, totally disengage. For younger kids, they may follow you around the house a little bit, but that's okay. You can just maybe repeat it one more time. When you complete X, then you can enjoy Y, and then that'll be the end of it. And then, of course, you have to stay firm and follow through. If you're not going to stay firm and you're not going to follow through, please don't even put this out there, right? Because all that does is teaches your kids that you are not serious. And why should they listen to you about anything, right? So if we're going to do this, let's stay firm. Now, let's use that example. When you finish your homework and I've checked it, then we can leave for soccer. You've laid out the win then, and guess what? She's downstairs at 4:30 with her soccer gear on because that's the time you normally leave for soccer. But you know that the homework isn't done. So what are you going to do? This is the rubber meets the road parenting moment, my friends, right? You could, oh, I told you, and you were supposed to have this done, and come on, let's get in the car, and we're going to race over to the soccer field and get her there on time, right? But what does that teach her? Well, it teaches her that her homework is not as important as going to soccer. It also teaches her that her responsibilities are not really responsibilities, and it teaches her that you're not serious about what you say, right? Now, let's take the opposite approach. When she comes down and she's ready to go to soccer, but her homework isn't done, and you stay firm and you follow through and you say, when your homework is finished and I've checked it, then we will leave for soccer. So what's going to happen? Well, she may be late for soccer or she may miss practice altogether. And guess what? Then she's going to have to call the coach and explain what happened. Would you want your kid to miss out on that learning opportunity? No, no. That is how kids learn responsibility. That's how they learn a sense of consequentiality. Now, I mentioned this is the rubber meets the road parenting moment because this is hard. Because I know you've paid a lot of money for your kids to be in challenge soccer. I get that. The coach is expecting her teammates are expecting her, and you don't want to look like a slacker parent. So this is not easy. I totally get that. But remember our long game here, right? We are trying to launch children, people who are responsible and respectful and understand a sense of consequentiality out in the world. So I'm going to beg you to stay firm and follow through and don't let her miss out on those important lessons. That's the beautiful thing about When Then is it teaches those life lessons. You don't have to be the bad guy. It's just the way that is the way it is. It's the natural consequences of things. Now, the pro tip that I would give you is to bring teachers and coaches into the loop. So let the soccer coach know, you know what, we're working on some personal responsibility training, and this is how I'm going to handle things. And so if she shows up late or she misses practice, I'd really like for you to back me up on that. You can do the same thing with teachers. I've never met a teacher or a coach who would not back up a parent who is trying to teach lessons of responsibility because that's exactly what they want for your kids too. All right. So let me know in the chat if you are game for that. And then ground rule number 5 is avoid repeating and reminding. Now, the first couple of days, you may need to give one more reminder. Remember that I said when you are finished with your family contributions, then you can have your technology time. But after the first couple days, no more repeating and reminding. They know what the deal is. All right? The great thing about this is you get out of the repeat, remind, explode cycle. You're not the bad guy. They are responsible for whether or not they get to enjoy their privileges. Now, I mentioned 5 ground rules and 1 caution. I want to mention a big caution, and that is that this tool is called when then. It's not called if then. All right? Think about how this sounds. Angeline, if you get your homework done, then you can have some technology time. Versus, Angeline, when you finish your homework, then you can enjoy your technology time. Do you feel the difference there? Doesn't if then sound kind of bribey? We're not bribing our kids, right? When we say if then, it assumes that we really don't think they're going to do it. And so we have to hang this carrot out there. When we say when then, it conveys that we have complete faith and confidence that they're going to do that thing. And when they do, then they can move on to the more enjoyable part of the routine that they have been looking forward to. Now, to that end, the question always comes up, is when then a reward? And the answer is no, no, because actually we do not advocate the use of rewards. There is a tremendous body of research that proves that when we use external rewards, it actually decreases internal motivation for kids. So we do not use rewards, especially for stuff that they're expected to do anyway. We don't use rewards. With when then, we are simply controlling the order in which a regularly allowed privilege can be enjoyed, right? In the examples that I gave you, the computer time, hanging out with friends, all of those things are things that he is normally allowed to do. I'm just controlling the order in which those things happen. So if you have questions around when then, please let me know or write them down, and then we will talk about them in the Q&A. So I want to ask you, do you have a situation in which you can use when then this week? If so, hit me with a thumbs up. All right, I want to go to our next tool in the toolbox, which is related to when thens, and that is when then routines, right? Kids need structure and routine. Even our tweens and teens thrive on structure and routine. So what we are going to make sure that we do is all of our routines are going to be set up in a when then fashion where the yucky stuff has to happen before the fun stuff. So in the morning, when you're up and dressed and your bed is made and your backpack and lunchbox are by the door, then we'll have breakfast, and then you can have some playtime for littles, or you can have your tablet time for the bigger kids. After school, same thing. When your homework is done and I've checked it, then you can have your playtime or your tech time. Evenings, same thing. All of our routines are set up in a when-then fashion. And the reason I say this is because when it's the routine, then the routine becomes the boss, and you don't have to be the boss anymore. It's just the way we do things every day. For younger kids, you may want to set a timer, and just so they know how much time is allotted for those routines. Really important for littles and bigs that when we use timers, it is a visual timer, like this one with the red dial, so they can see how much time is left. Younger kids cannot process a countdown timer on your microwave or on your phone. Complete waste of time, right? Even for older kids, all they see with that digital timer is one moment in time. They don't see the relationship with time. So with littles and bigs, use those timers. Again, the routine becomes the boss. This is just the way we do things every day. There's no need to discuss it or negotiate it. That's the routine. That's our policy. All right, the question then always comes up. What if I use a when then and he still doesn't do what I ask, right? Well, when then, first off, is not going to be used for every single situation. There's lots of other tools that we have in our toolbox. And sometimes those tools have to get a little bit more consequential. So the next tool that I want to talk to you about is consequences, specifically a no guilt, no yelling formula for consequences. So this comes from step 3 of our 7-step parenting success system, and it includes 5 R's. So I'm going to go through those 5 R's and then give you a script that you could use. So the first of the 5 R's is that the consequence has to be respectful, right? So there's no yelling or screaming or shaming the child. That is not helpful. That does not create a learning event. That only makes a kid want to just shut down and tune you out. That's not what we're here to do. Remember how we talked about one of the parenting blunders is kids perceiving that we're not on our team. Well, that's one of the reasons when we yell and we blame and we shame and make them feel bad about what they've done. That's not being on their team, and it doesn't help them learn for the future. We can be unhappy with the behavior, but we can handle consequences in a calm and loving way. And that means using a calm and respectful voice. And if you're angry and frustrated and you can't come up with your calm and respectful voice, don't deal with it in that moment, right? 99% of stuff does not have to be dealt with in that moment. You can wait 15 minutes, a half hour later in the day, and then deal with it, especially with your older kids. You can always bring them back to it, but don't deal with it in the moment when you are upset. The second R is that it needs to be related to the misbehavior, right? There's this kind of parenting theory that for discipline or punishment, you use whatever is most important to the kid. So if technology is most important to the kid, that's what we take away for everything that happens. Well, that doesn't work, right? Because eventually the kid's like, whatever, I don't care about the iPad. The power struggle with the parent becomes more important. What we're trying to create is a learning event for the child. So for your middle schooler who refuses to wear a bike helmet, right? If you don't wear the bike helmet, well, then you don't get to ride your bike. If you do not come in time for curfew, well, then you're not going to be able to go out with your friends the following weekend. It makes sense. It's connected. All right. Now, let's say that she has been using the phone. I've asked her to turn it off and totally ignores me. And I say, young lady, that's it. I have had it. You are not going to the football game this weekend with your friends. How do you think she responds to that? Well, she's probably like, oh, that is so not fair. You're so mean. I hate you. And like the whole thing goes down. Well, you know what? She's kind of right. It really is unfair. Going to the football game with her friends has nothing to do with the fact that she didn't put the technology away. That is an example of a willy-nilly consequence, right? It's an act of parent desperation where we are just pulling things out of the air because we don't know what to do. The problem with willy-nilly consequences is that it turns the anger on you, right? You become the bad guy. Your child is not taking personal responsibility for her behavior. It's all about you and how mean you are. Here's the deal. Your kids don't have to like the consequence, but it must feel fair. If it feels willy-nilly, the anger is going to get turned on you again, and it's not going to be effective. Now, for those of you who are having a panic attack of like, I can't think of a related consequence for this situation, do not stress, right? If you can't think of a consequence that is related, it probably means that consequences are not the right tool in this situation. All right, after respectful and related to misbehavior, the third R is that it needs to be reasonable in duration. So for a little kid who's throwing puzzle pieces around the room, it's reasonable to pack away the puzzle for a day, right? For an older child who is using her device at the dinner table and she knows that that is not okay, it would be reasonable for her to lose her technology privileges for a week. Just keep it reasonable based on the child's age and development. After the three R's of respectful, related, and reasonable, the fourth R is that it needs to be revealed in advance. Revealed in advance so your child has the power to make a choice between the appropriate behavior and the consequence. Right? Once she knows what you expect and what the consequence will be, then she can determine how things work out for her. It's not something that you're doing to her, it is a choice that she is making. And then again, our last R is repeated back, right? Just so we're on the same page, sweetie, can you repeat back to me our new rule and what the consequence would be for not following that rule? Once she repeats back, then we have a verbal agreement. We know everybody's on the same page. And if I have to follow through and implement that consequence, she can't be mad at me. She can only be mad at herself. Now, we both know that she's gonna be mad at me, but that's okay. That's okay. She knows deep down that she made that choice because she knew the deal ahead of time, and we confirmed that by having her repeat back. So anytime we are using consequences, we want to make sure that they include the 5 R's. Now, let me give you a quick script for how we would reveal consequences. So let's use the example of technology again, because it's such a big deal for littles all the way up to bigs. And again, it's becoming such a bigger issue, especially since the pandemic. So again, I've just about had it because I ask my kids to turn off the devices. They don't do it. They ignore me, or there's a bunch of grumbling and groaning, and I have just about had it. So I know that I need to have a conversation and lay out the consequences. So the first thing is I'm going to make sure that I'm in the proper state of mind when I do that. I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to be angry. I'm probably going to have this conversation one night after dinner when everybody's in a good and happy place. And the conversation would go something like this. First, I'm going to very calmly state the concern. You know what, guys? I've noticed that when I ask you to turn off the device, either you ignore me or there's a lot of grumbling and groaning. And that's not cool because you know that having technology is a privilege and there are responsibilities that go along with that. What do you guys think? Do you think it's reasonable? I think that's totally reasonable. And I know I started the conversation with I've noticed because it's very disarming. I didn't say, you always ignore me, you never listen to me, because that for sure would have gotten us into a power struggle. Then I'm going to be very clear about what I expect. So, guys, in the future, I expect that when I ask you to turn off the device, I expect that you're going to do that and without any grumbling and groaning. Now, I'll give you a 5-minute warning so you can save your game, but I'm not going to give any reminders. I'm not going to give second chances. It's up to you to turn it off. And let me also say that if your kids are old enough to be using devices, they're old enough to understand that rule, right? We also want to remind them that technology is a privilege and not a right. And you, as the parent, are required to set the boundaries around that. All right, now I've laid out the expectation, but I'm no dummy, so I am going to reveal the consequence. So, guys, I'm sure we're not going to have an issue with this, but I want to let you know that if I ask you to turn off that device and you ignore my request, or there's a lot of grumbling and groaning or begging for 5 more minutes, you're going to lose your technology privileges for the next week. So where are we at this point? Well, he is fully informed. He knows exactly what I expect, and he knows what the consequence will be if he makes a poor choice. But again, I'm going to close that loop by having the child repeat back, just so we're on the same page. Can you repeat back to me our new rule for technology and what the consequence will be if you choose not to follow that rule? Again, once they repeat back, then we have a verbal agreement and everybody is on the same page. The key thing about this formula is that it is personal responsibility in the making, right? They own the choice. Whether they choose the appropriate behavior or the consequence, they own this. It's not something that you are doing to them. Now, I want to remind us that there are 5 R's, right? And anytime we are using consequences, we want to make sure that it includes the 5 R's. And so that's why you're not going to be doing consequences in the heat of the moment, because you want to think them through. The other thing to remember is that the 5 R's works when there is a clear and obviously related consequence, right? Of those 5 R's that I mentioned, related is probably the hardest one to come up to, right? Bad font again. Somebody keeping track so I can send a copy of my book to the person who catches the most occurrences of this. What this would say, if you could read it, is that actually we only want to use consequences 10 to 15% of the time, right? Any more than that, power struggles are going to increase and you are going to end up being the bad guy and we're going to be right back in those power struggles, which we do not want. The truth bomb here is that you cannot consequence your way to better behavior, right? It's one tool, but it's not going to be everything that you need. In fact, for some of the bigger ticket power struggles, we wouldn't use consequences at all. We would actually use other tools from our toolbox or a combination of tools. The good news is that there are lots of tools and you are going to have access to all of them. And that's what I want to share with you is truly this life-changing gift for all of our Roxbury families. The school district has made available to you our entire 7-step parenting success system online course. So I want to show you just very quickly what that entails, and then we are going to, I'm going to take any questions that you might have. So the online course is appropriate for toddlers all the way up to teenagers. Excuse me. sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze, toddlers all the way up to teenagers. It is a 7-step system. And in each step, you have your video lessons. And that's where I teach you the tools in the toolbox. The videos are really quick, like 5 to 15 minutes. You learn a tool, I give you the scripts, tell you how to implement it, boom, and then you go. And you have examples for littles and big kids for all of these tools. There are 36 tools in the toolbox. We covered 3 of them tonight, actually 4. But there are so many more for you to learn. They're going to make such a difference in your family. The tools work for all kids, including those with differences, learning differences, attention, sensory, social differences. You can still use these tools. You're going to go through that parent personality assessment that I mentioned, and that you're going to go through in step 1 of the 7-step system. That assessment is going to help you understand how you trigger your kid's behavior. If you have a parenting partner, you can both go through the assessment. We also have loads of advanced modules. So for things like for your littles, bedtime battles or morning battles, mealtime, chore wars, there are advanced modules. And these are an hour to an hour and a half long on one specific topic with step-by-step action plans, all of the tools you need, step-by-step scripts, everything that you need for that particular topic area. We also have even more advanced modules, which are categorized, or which are in different categories. So we have loads of topics for the littles, for the tweens and teens, loads of topics for homework and school-related issues, kids with differences, ending the entitlement epidemic, and even advanced sessions for your adult relationships, like getting your partner on the same parenting page or parenting through divorce. So tons and tons of advanced training. And I know you don't need all of these right now, depending on the age of your kids, but you may in 5 years or even 10 years, for that matter, if you have littles. So the school has arranged for you to have lifetime access for your family, including all of the updates and additions. So, oh, and there's also a mobile app. So we're the only parenting program that has a fully integrated mobile app. So no matter where you are, you're always going to have me with you. You're going to have your toolbox with you. Everything is there in the mobile app if you prefer to do it that way rather than on your computer. If there are 2 parents in the home, you can both access the course from your individual devices, no problem at all. So I hope that you will enroll in the 7-step parenting success system. I think it'll be life-changing for you. If you do want to enroll, and tell me by a thumbs up, all you need to do is contact your school principal. They are going to send you a link which will bring you to this enrollment page. Now, if you were going to buy this course on your own from our website, you would pay $221 for it, but the school has already paid for it on your behalf, just as a demonstration of their commitment to partnering with you for your children. So you're going to get the link to this page, and then you're going to get a coupon code. So you enter your coupon code, and then it will come up as $0. You fill out all your information, and you're going to have immediate access to everything. So I hope that sounds great. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Also, we started just at the first of the year a study hall for our course members where I'm taking parents through kind of step by step each of the 7 sessions or each of the 7 steps in the process. And so we've closed that out, but we are reopening it for Roxbury parents. So if you are interested in being part of that study hall where I give you a lot more personal attention and basically walk you through all of those steps in addition to what you're doing in the online course, just reach out to our team. And so once you enroll, you can email us at help@positiveparentingsolutions.com, and we will let us know that you want to be in the study hall, and we will put you in that. All right, I've talked super fast here tonight. We've covered a bunch of tools. I would love to know what questions you have about the different tools that we have talked about. So Mrs. Gallagher or whoever's handling the questions, is there anything that has been submitted that I can answer?
In terms of the chat, there hasn't been anything updated in the chat. So for those of you that weren't with us to get things started, please, if you'd rather remain anonymous, you can put your question in the chat. Otherwise, you can raise your hand, and I'll be able to call and unmute you so that you can ask your question directly to Amy. So I see here Renee. I'm gonna request to unmute you, and then you can ask your question.
Hi, Renee.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you so much for being here. The question I have is, can children have ADHD or insomnia from electronics, or what would cause those types of things, especially insomnia?
Yes. So, there is mixed opinion on the effect of electronics and technology on kids with ADHD. Some people feel that it, makes them more hyped up, and actually makes their attention differences more difficult. And some will say that it actually has some beneficial effects. So I would defer to your clinician on that. With regard to the insomnia, that is not an area that that's not my area of expertise, so I would not want to comment on that. However, I would say, if you haven't done so already, I would start backing off the technology time. So you can, start backing it up by 15 minutes a night and see if that makes a difference. Let me just make a comment about technology in general. For those of you who enroll in the online course, there is an entire advanced module on technology, including a technology contract. What I would highly recommend is a couple of things. First, you lay some important ground rules around technology. First, your curfew times, when it's okay to have technology. And again, technology should always, always, always be leveraged as part of a win-win routine, right? When you've completed your homework, when you've done your family jobs, when you've had your outside active time. When those things have happened, and only when, then you can enjoy your technology. So have it as a win-win routine. I also highly recommend that you have a central place in your house, which is your charging station. And all devices go to the charging station. We do not charge phones in kids' rooms. And I know kids will say, well, I need my phone. That's my alarm clock. Well, no, we'll go to Target and get an old school alarm clock. You don't need your phone in your room. So all devices are in the charging station. Parents may want to keep that in their bedroom. Maybe you keep it in the kitchen, wherever, but it's not willy-nilly we have our devices all day long, because you know how it is. Kids will always gravitate towards the easiest thing that provides like the dopamine hit, which is exactly what technology does. So let's have very limited time when they can have access to that technology, but um, but always as part of a win-win routine. So Renee, I totally went off on a tangent there. I'm sorry that I can't help you in greater detail with the insomnia issues. Anything else, Mrs. Gallagher, in terms of questions?
So we have a couple people in the chat very interested in the lessons. Um, just a reminder, you're going to want to reach out to the building principal. So if you're at the high school, you can email Mr. Miller, dmiller@roxbury.org. If your child's at the middle school, pgallagher@roxbury.org, and they can set you up with that coupon code. Somebody also asked about availability on the phone. I can say for myself, I got the app, so it's right on my phone, so that's accessible. All right, another question. How do you do for second? How do you reinforce things for a younger child when things were not done for the older child?
I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Amy, do you have a sense for what
Yeah.
that is about?
It seems like to me, and the person that wrote it, if you want to clarify a little bit, but what it seems like to me is, how do you insist on things for a younger child? Maybe it's rules, things like that, that you were not insistent upon for the older child.
Okay. So I think, that's an opportunity. First off, with Mind, Body, and Soul Time, that is your silver bullet for cooperation. So whatever you are requiring your younger ones to do, it's going to go a lot more smoothly if we're regularly doing Mind, Body, and Soul Time as part of his or her normal routine. And the other thing is, it's just, when they're complaining about, well, brother didn't have to do that, sister didn't have to do that, that's not fair, why do I have to do it? like sometimes that's just the way it is, right? And so when those complaints happen, we have a choice. We can go into a big explanation and justify and make all these excuses and give all this verbal feedback to those complaints. Or you can just kind of let it go in one ear and out the other, right? You could say, I understand that's frustrating for you. I know that can be difficult. Or you can just say, and then go about your business. But the more energy and attention and power that you give to those complaints, whether it's about what their responsibilities they have to do or whatever, it's only going to perpetuate that behavior in the future. So I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but that would be my 2 cents on that.
That's great. And looking, I'm not seeing anyone else with their hand up.
So I have a few other tools if you want me to continue going through them, or we can just continue asking for questions. I'm totally game for whatever is going to best serve you all.
Let's see. Oh, we got another question.
Oh, good.
So for a teen that has ADHD, it's very hard for them to stay focused, keeping and staying on task. The tools presented work well for my other students, but the one with ADHD is a struggle. Any tips for those that really struggle to stay focused and on task?
So there is an advanced session in the course that I'm going to direct you to that'll answer this question in much more detail than I have time to do here. And the session is called Study Skills for Kids with ADHD and Executive Function Differences. And that is an entire hour and a half from an expert in that area. And there are so many helpful suggestions in there. Sounds like this was actually coming from a teacher and not a parent. But whether you are a educator or a parent, go through that session and it's going to give you a lot of support there.
That's wonderful. I know I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, super helpful.
That's great. So I'm not seeing any other questions. I think I would love to hear some of the other tips that you have. So if you wanted to keep going, especially seeing this next slide, I know for my own sake as a parent, that's going to be great information.
Yes. So as I was preparing this, I just wanted to throw together just loads of tools that will help with the backtalk attitude and disrespect, because this happens with littles, but it happens more probably with tweens and teens because again they're trying to get their own sense of control and power, and they're trying to separate from us, and sometimes this just happens. So I have a bunch of tools that I'm going to share with you, and I hope they are helpful. So the first and most important tool for minimizing backtalk, disrespect, and attitude is mind, body, and soul time. I mean, it just is. It is the most important tool in the toolbox. And the reason for that is that misbehavior is never, ever just a kid problem, right? What we have to remember is that we play an equal role in that. And that's why going through that parent personality assessment is going to be so important. And that's why we put it in step 1. Now, I will tell you, as you go through the lessons in step 1, please go through in order because everything builds on each other. And when you get to the parent personality assessment, it'll make a lot more sense if you've been through the lessons before that. So definitely go through that. The other thing that I want to just remind us of is parenting blunder number 3, which was not being on their team. And again, that comes from a lot of ordering, correcting, and directing, and all those other things that we do as parents that totally annoy the heck out of our teenagers, right? So I want to talk about a couple of on their team communication tools. Now, I want to ask you another question that I want you to think about and even like write down. From morning until night, what do your kids hear from you, right? How much ordering, correcting, and directing do you think you do in a typical day? Well, when I surveyed parents in our program, they were so honest and told us that probably 90% of their communication with their kids is ordering, directing, and correcting. And we also know that ordering, correcting, and directing is a guaranteed recipe for a power struggle because, again, nobody wants to be controlled. The natural instinct is to push back. If when you take the parent personality assessment, you score higher in the controlling category, this is probably a problem for you. So what I want you to do is shift that communication. I want you to strive for 90% of the communication during your day with your kids. I want it to be encouraging or at least neutral. Like neutral would be, hey guys, dinner's ready. That would be like a neutral statement, right? But encouraging, think of all the awesome things about your kids. We tend to focus on all the things that they're not doing or they do wrong or they're not meeting our expectations. Think about all of the amazing things about your kids. Physically, write those down and make a list. And I want you to encourage them multiple times during the day on all of those things, right? Encouragement is cumulative. And the more they get of that encouragement, the more they are going to repeat those behaviors that you are encouraging. All right. So please really focus on encouragement. There has to be a little bit of order and correcting and directing, right? But let's have that be just the very minor portion of our communication and the majority of it being encouragement. The next thing I want to ask you is, how are you showing up? All right. How is your energy with your kids? Are you the taskmaster mom? Got to get this done, got to get that done, controlling everything, always in a rush, always in a hurry? It's kind of the way I am naturally, to be honest with you. How are you showing up? Or are you the light, easy mom or dad with a smile on their face, a joy to be around, right? Which version of you do your kids want to be with? Which version of you do your kids want to connect with? So I really want you to think hard about how you are showing up with your kids, right? If you're easy, if you're light, they are going to be easy and light. Kids, littles and bigs, totally mirror us in terms of our emotion, right? And so if we are easygoing, they are going to be more easygoing. And if you're not showing up as the light, easy, joyful mom or dad, I want you to think about what you need to do to make that happen. Do you need to get up 15 minutes earlier and just like listen to a guided meditation, or put on joyful jam music or relaxing spa music, or like whatever it is, but do what you need to do to get yourself in a state that when you're with your kids, you're the light, easy mom, right? Light, easy dad. There's going to be times where you have to give direction and things are more serious, but that's going to go so much more smoothly if the majority of the time you're showing up in a state that they want to be around. All right. So tell me with a thumbs up if that resonates with you at all. In step one, you are going to learn a concept called the ego states of personality. And what I'm going to be training you to do is to be more in the child ego state, because that is the state where our kids enjoy us most and where we make emotional connections, especially with our tweens and teens. So anyway, you'll be learning more about that in step one. All right, let's talk more about backtalk, attitude, and disrespect. When that happens, when you get those sassy remarks, the eye rolls, like all that nonsense, how do you respond? All right. What I want you to remember is that back talk is like a game of tennis. All right. So if you and I are playing tennis and I serve the ball to you and you hit it back to me, guess what? We have a game going on, right? Same is true for back talk. When your kids serve up one of those sassy responses, and you respond back, you hit the ball back, then we have a game going. We have a power struggle going on. So you have a choice. You can respond and hit that ball back, or you can let that ball drop and walk away. And guess what happens when you let the ball drop and walk away? Your kid's like they didn't even know what to do. There's nobody to play with. All right. So the next time you get one of those backtalk sassy responses, think about your choice in that moment. You can engage, you can meet power with power, or you can let that ball drop and you can just walk away and refuse to negotiate or refuse to engage in that. So I'd love to know in the chat what you think about that. All right, one of the most powerful tools that you can do to minimize backtalk with your kids is own it. All right, remember that misbehavior is never just a kid problem. We own a part of that. So I want you to own that with your kids and come clean and say, you know what, guys? I have noticed lately that I have been yelling more than I want to. I sometimes speak to you in a way that isn't that respectful, and that is not good. That's not fair, and I know you must not like that. So I want you to help me with that. When you hear me using my big mom voice, I want you to tell me. So come up with some nonverbal signal. Maybe they put their hand over their heart, they put their hand over their ears, finger over their mouth, whatever it is, but it is some nonverbal that they let you know that you're bringing out that big dad voice and it's not cool. Bring them into the process to help you with that. You will get so much mileage out of that, you can't even imagine. They will think that is the greatest thing ever. So I want you to come clean with them, get them to help you, and then I want you to work as hard as you can on that calm voice. I want you to channel your Mr. Rogers. Oh, like, didn't we just love his voice? It was so soothing and so calm. And if we can channel that Mr. Rogers voice with our kids just by speaking more slowly and lowering the volume of our speech, it'll make a huge difference in the temperament with your kids. So I want you to try that tomorrow. And when you are enrolled in the course, I want to hear how that is going for you. All right, the next tool, instead of ordering, correcting, and directing, instead of telling them what they need to do, you can use a tool called What is Your Plan For? I love this tool. So instead of saying, you need to get your room cleaned up, right? You can say, what is your plan for tidying your room? The reason this is so empowering is because, first off, you're not ordering, correcting, and directing, you're just asking a question. And it starts with the premise that you have complete faith and confidence that she's going to clean her room. You're just asking, what is your plan for doing that? And it allows her to save face, right? Because she can say, oh, you know what? I was just about to do that. I'm finishing up this thing in my book. And then I was going to start cleaning the room. And you can say, cool, I knew you had that under control. It is so empowering for parents and for kids. They get so sick of us telling them what to do. What is your plan for finishing your Spanish project this weekend? Right? Totally empowering. You knew she had a plan in place and she's got it under control. Mrs. Gallagher, did you have a question that you wanted to ask me?
Yeah. In terms of the back talk, the question is, wouldn't walking away from that behavior mean you're condoning the behavior?
Oh, I'm so glad that question was asked. Thank you, whoever asked that. Okay, this is huge, guys. All right. By walking away, you are not condoning it. And what I would encourage you to do, remember the reveal in advance thing we talked about? This is a perfect opportunity to reveal in advance. And you could say, you know what? I've noticed that sometimes when you're frustrated or angry about something, you'll say something in a voice that doesn't sound very respectful. And I know you would never be disrespectful to me. Like, I totally get that. But sometimes in the heat of the moment, we all get angry. And so I just want to let you know that in the future, if you say something to me that feels disrespectful or hurts my feelings, I'm not going to respond back in that moment because I love you too much to get into a fight with you. I love you too much to argue with you. I love you too much to say something that would be disrespectful. So if that happens, I'm going to do this. Remember that nonverbal signal? I'm going to do this and I'm going to walk away. And all that means is that I don't want to say anything that would be hurtful. And so I'm going to remove myself so I can calm my body and calm my emotions. And then we can get back together and talk about it. That's not condoning the behavior. That's just saying I'm an adult and I don't want to meet power with power. And I don't want to reinforce that yelling and shouting at each other is okay, right? It says that I have control of my emotions, and so I'm going to step away and handle it. That removes the power payoff. It lets that ball drop so we're no longer in that back and forth tennis match. And it is amazing modeling that says we all get frustrated and angry, and I have the power to control my emotions. But we have this feeling like when we hear that, we have to like get on it and get in their face and come back at it. We can't allow that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? Like, that's not real life because it is really hard being a teenager. There are so many pressures on our tweens and teens, so many things that happened in their day that we don't even know about. And when they come home and they lose it with us with a sassy remark or whatever, we are their safe place. and it just happens. So we can turn that into a positive learning opportunity rather than adding fuel to the fire. Does that make sense, Mrs. Gallagher? All right, I'm going to jump on to another tool. Is that cool?
Yes, that's great. And I think you definitely answered that well. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful. All right, let me just look at my time. All right, I have 6 minutes with y'all. All right, another tool. Instead of ordering, correcting, and directing, I'm going to suggest that we invite cooperation. All right, instead of you left your stuff all over the living room, I need you to clean it up, right? Why don't we invite cooperation? And that would sound like this. Hey, anything that you can do to tidy up the living room while I start dinner would be amazing, right? Anything that you can do to help would be amazing. That's not a directive. That is a person-to-person appeal that they're 9.5 times out of 10 likely to respond to. All right. Oops, I lost track of my slides. Hang on. Let me get to another one. Anything that you can do to help with the laundry would be amazing. All right. Now, you have to be willing for them to say, I'm good. And that's okay. You'll move on to something else. But I'm just telling you guys, the more that we invite cooperation rather than directing, it is so much more effective. And remember, if you have been doing Mind, Body, and Soul time on a consistent basis, their level of cooperation is going to skyrocket. I promise you. If you've been using these more effective communication tools, less ordering, correcting, and directing, the cooperation is going to skyrocket. Okay, I saw Renee asked a question, where do we get copies of this? You're not going to have a copy, well, there will be a replay of this presentation that the school will have on the website. And you're going to have all these tools and all of the advanced modules and everything else when you enroll in the 7-Step Parenting Success System online course. You just have to contact your school principal for that. All right, another one. Instead of jumping in with a lecture, because we tend to do that a lot, instead of doing that, I'm going to encourage you to use an I hear ya. I hear ya. You're going to show empathy without giving in. So that would sound like, I hear ya. Unloading the dishwasher is my least favorite job. Again, if the entire text was there. Right? That doesn't mean he doesn't have to do it, but it says, I get it. Right? I feel ya. I know where you're coming from. I used to hate doing that too. When my mom used to ask me to do that, it used to drive me crazy. We will get so much farther by having a moment of empathy. Empathy creates emotional connection, and they are going to be so much more willing to do that task if you show empathy. I hear ya. I know you've had a lot of homework lately. That must feel really overwhelming, right? Doesn't that feel so good when somebody gets you? Let's use that with our kids as opposed to going on with the lecture about how homework is your responsibility and when I was in school and like all that nonsense, right? And then instead of assuming it's all about you, like whenever we get that back talk and the attitude and the sassiness and the disrespect, our immediate response is, how dare he? He is so disrespectful. How dare he do that to me? Like all that I do for these kids. It's not about you, right? Sometimes it is just that they've had the hardest day. They have an AP class, they have practice, they have all these responsibilities. Like the boyfriend just broke up with her. Like there's all this stuff that is completely out of our realm of understanding. It's not all about us. And so sometimes the check-in is the most helpful thing that we can do. And that starts with, you know what, you seem frustrated, you seem angry, you seem upset. Is there anything that I can do to help? Right? I'm just here to help you. You seem really overwhelmed. Is there anything that I can do? Isn't that so much more powerful? It creates that emotional connection, and it says that I care more about the family contributions and your homework and all the other stuff. I just care about you, and I am here to help you. Even though they're supposed to separate from us, they still need us. And that's why we're doing Mind, Body, and Soul time. And that's why we're using these more effective communications tools. And then one of my all-time favorites, which I just talked about a little while ago, instead of fighting power with power, right? When we get that sassy attitude, you can respond with my favorite, oops, I love you too much to argue, right? I love you too much to argue about this. I'm going to take a few minutes to calm myself down. Oh, what amazing modeling. That is so powerful for our kids. And my friends, I'm going to wrap us up. We have 1 minute to go, and I'm going to turn it back to Amy in a second. But I want to say this. I know that everything that I have taught you here tonight, this is hard, right? This goes against all of our gut parenting reactions. This is hard work, and it takes intentional attention. You know what I'm saying? It's hard. But I want us to remember the end game that we talked about, those responsible, respectful, resilient young people that we are launching into the world with the skills and the character traits and all that they need to be successful adults. So that is what we are working for. That is our long game. And I'm hoping that these tools will help you in that regard, in addition to everything that you're going to be learning in the 7-Step Parenting Success System. Mrs. Gallagher, back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. You have given us some really tremendous tools. And as you said, parenting is hard work. The more that we can work with one another, use the resources that are available to us, the easier that it gets. So a couple reminders about some of those resources. Those of you that are attending, you're going to get a survey just so that we know what you got out of these experiences. And we're going to use those surveys as a means of raffling off Amy's book. Additionally, if you are interested in the class, and we definitely have some interest in the chat, please reach out to your building principal. Just let them know that you attended, you are interested in the class. We are doing a recording of this presentation, and it will be posted on the district website. So if you know of anyone else that was interested in attending this that wasn't able to, they're going to be able to watch a recording of this. And if you are watching the recording and are interested in these resources, you can also reach out to the building principal. So again, you don't have to have attended the live session to have access to these resources. You're going to do so by contacting your building principal. So with all of that being said, thank you again, Amy. This was really, really tremendous. We really appreciate you being here with us. And thank you to all the parents that have spent the evening with us. Your commitment to being the best parents you can be really is to be commended. And have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.